During Lewis and Clark's expedition, a woman named Sacagawea suffered from terrible pain, and only recently have scientists discovered the horrifying reason for it. She was truly a strong and resilient woman. When she was a teenage mother, this brave traveler from the Shoshone people tied her infant to her back and boldly headed west across the continent to take part in Lewis and Clark's famous expedition. For most people, Sacagawea's fate is limited to this heroic beginning and conclusion. However, her story is much more complex and filled with events. From dangerous childhood years to a nightmare marriage, there is much more to tell about her, as she became a true legend among indigenous peoples. Sacagawea was born in the 18th century, in 1788, in the scenic mountains on the border of modern Montana and Idaho. Around the age of 12, her life dramatically changed when her people, the Shoshone, were attacked in a brutal raid by the Hidatsa tribe. During this raid, Sacagawea witnessed horrifying scenes. She saw several of her tribesmen die before her eyes. She was immediately kidnapped and taken to Hidatsa lands. In some versions of her story, it is mentioned that she endured cruel treatment in captivity and was turned into a slave, enduring 3 long years of enslavement and humiliation. When Sacagawea was 16, her captors decided that she was more valuable as a young bride than as a mere slave. According to this decision, she was sold to a man named Toussaint Charbonneau. Other accounts say he won her in a game of chance. In any case, the truth is difficult to establish with certainty, but it is known that this man was a French-Canadian settler with a reputation as a brutal oppressor and a seller of women into slavery. Clearly, Charbonneau was not gentle or humane. He was evidently only interested in using women for his own purposes, not respecting their consent. Authoritative sources indicate that Sacagawea was not his only wife. In fact, he was already married to another woman from the Shoshone tribe. What is especially striking is that the women he acquired, around 30 years old, had no choice in their fateful union with this man. At the time of her marriage, Sacagawea was only about 16 years old, and there was a 30-year age gap between them, which speaks to the ruthless cruelty her new owner showed towards her. In November 1804, when her marriage with Charbonneau was just beginning, fate unexpectedly brought her together with 2 people who would forever change her life. These were the exploration captains, Lewis and Clark, whose expedition led them through uncharted lands, and whom Sacagawea met later in life, after enduring numerous trials and horrors. This meeting marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, and her story continues to be one of the most vivid and tragic pages in the history of the Native American peoples. Lewis and Clark embarked on a perilous and important journey to explore the recently acquired lands of America and to create a detailed map of the territories added to the country as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. However, their team was not fully staffed. They needed guides and interpreters from among the native peoples to successfully traverse the vast expanse of the continent and understand its complexity. These companions proved to be invaluable, as without them, any attempts to chart this limitless region would have been significantly hindered. At first, the pair thought that a man named Toussaint Charbonneau was not the most important of their guides, but they deeply liked his wife. Since Sacagawea spoke the Shoshone language, they wanted to take her along so she could serve as an intermediary between them and other tribes. Closely linked to this, Charbonneau's fate was not particularly significant. He essentially played the role of a fourth wheel. Many months before the expedition began, their firstborn, a boy named Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, was born. It is said that during the childbirth, Sacagawea made an unusual decision. She ate crushed rattlesnakes, believing it would help speed up the labor. This demonstrated her unwavering strength and the struggle that had begun long before the start of this journey. Most young mothers try to hold themselves together and not rush after giving birth, but Sacagawea was not of that kind. In just a few weeks after her baby's arrival, she set out with Lewis and Clark on a difficult and dangerous trek. The expedition started in April 1805, and everyone knew it would be challenging, but the trials for Sacagawea were especially harsh, primarily because she, as a new mother, had to carry her tiny infant on her back throughout the entire journey. constantly facing the dangers of unexplored lands. Nonetheless, Sacagawea was crucial to the success of this expedition. Her role in keeping everything under control was also significant. She translated and established contacts between the travelers and local tribes, prepared food, foraged, did the cleaning, made herbal medicines, and practically ensured the expedition's smooth operation. She did everything with ease and professionalism, creating the illusion that everything was going as smoothly as clockwork. But even the strongest person can eventually face something that shakes them to their core. For Sacagawea, approaching a new stretch of the route revealed something very familiar, a place she immediately recognized. It was the land where, many years ago, she was kidnapped from her homeland. Her heart immediately clenched as she found herself closer than ever before to her childhood and her home. However, demonstrating her strength and resilience, she did not cry. She did not allow herself to show weakness at the moment when she was face to face with a place that held deep meaning for her, a symbol of the past traumas she had to overcome. This unwavering resolve spoke of how much she had become stronger. After years of living, she had transformed from a vulnerable girl into a woman capable of withstanding any trials. One day on May 14th, 1805, the expedition encountered an unexpected difficulty that threatened to jeopardize their entire journey. That day, Sacagawea's husband, operating one of the vessels, suddenly faced a strong gust of wind that seemed to come out of nowhere. This powerful gust so shook him and caused him to lose control that he nearly capsized the boat. Frightened to the core, in a panic, he almost overturned the vessel completely. Fortunately, Sacagawea was nearby, displaying bravery and decisiveness. Without hesitation, she plunged into the dangerous waters and saved not only crucial documents that the wave nearly carried away, but also essential equipment that was struggling against the current and the wind. After this incident, Chabano sat there, paralyzed by fear and unable to move, while the same Sacagawea, without panic, heroically rescued the documents and tools, not even hesitating. Following the event, William Lewis's remarks were recorded in his journal, noting that Chabano was a man without particular virtues, one of the most shy and clumsy mariners he had known. However, despite his comical awkwardness, his character and actions repeatedly proved that jokes and underestimations against him were completely unfounded. On the contrary, he could cause considerable trouble, especially for Sacagawea herself, whose life he repeatedly made worse. As evidenced by a troubling entry in the explorer's diaries, just a month after she saved the expedition, Sacagawea suddenly fell seriously ill and was losing her mind. Modern historians speculate that the cause might have been gonorrhea, a disease she likely contracted from her unscrupulous husband. Clark, observing Chabano's behavior during his wife's illnesses, was so displeased with his attitude that he left a rather harsh remark. "If she dies, it will be his fault, and I am already convinced of that." Sacagawea managed to recover sufficiently to continue the journey, but soon after, Lewis and Clark's team reached the lands of the Shoshone people, the region where she had grown up as a child. When she first recognized this familiar territory, she showed no outward emotion. She maintained a restrained calm and cool composure. But soon, everything changed. Emotions surged outward, and her restrained face broke apart, giving way to genuine joy. She began to sing and danced, astonishing and even shocking other travelers. Importantly, this was not only the place she recognized, it was something greater. Here, she met people from her past, those who had entered her life even earlier. Among the faces she encountered was a girl who had fallen victim to another foreign hostile tribal feud. She was kidnapped, but managed to escape and return home to the Shoshone people. Deeply impressed and shaken by this, Sacagawea truly experienced a complex, intense kaleidoscope of emotions upon hearing about the life she could have had. When she met the tribe's chief, another familiar face appeared before her, her own brother, Kamehovit. Upon seeing him for the first time, she felt an incredible mixture of feelings, and this marked a new chapter in her destiny. Claire recounts that Sacagawea danced, delighting everyone present with her bright and expressive movements that created an atmosphere of joy and serenity. Lewis notes that everyone who witnessed this performance experienced a deep, touching feeling, as those present felt an authentic connection and warmth of family reunion. Another diary entry records that when Sacagawea realized that the person she had met was indeed her brother, she immediately and sincerely threw her woolen blanket over him as a sign of love and recognition. At that moment, she burst into tears from emotion and joy, and they continued their private conversation throughout the night. In some versions of this story, it is mentioned that Sacagawea also met a man she was to marry. In her youth, her family had promised her in marriage to a fellow tribesman, which added particular significance to her destiny. Entries in Claire's diary from November 1804 describe how Charbonneau brutally beat Sacagawea. In one instance, when faced with this injustice, the researchers were forced to intervene. Charbonneau's wife was subjected to harsh treatment for speaking to another native woman, and the diary's entries sharply condemned his roughness and cruelty toward his wife. By the fall of 1805, the journey across America was becoming increasingly bleak and impassable. The travelers' surroundings noticeably impoverished, so even Sacagawea, usually capable of finding food in any conditions, returned empty-handed after several days. Eventually, the adventurers became so exhausted that they had to eat even fatty layers just to stay on their feet and survive in these harsh lands. Despite the dangers and hardships of the journey, Lewis and Claire consistently describe Sacagawea in bright and positive terms. According to them, she was brave, persistent, intelligent, lively, determined, and very inventive. She displayed inexhaustible energy and loyalty to the cause. Claire best expressed her qualities by saying that Sacagawea inspired them and gave them strength to move forward. After a long and exhausting journey, the travelers finally reached the west coast. During the expedition, Sacagawea hardly made any demands, but upon hearing about the sea giant, an enormous whale, washed ashore, she insisted on going personally to see this wonder of nature. She greatly enjoyed observing this magnificent creature and admiring the boundless beauty of the Pacific Ocean. One of her happiest moments remained in her memory, as it was the last time she could feel joy and peace. Soon after, Sacagawea took a deep breath of the fresh sea air and marveled at the majestic calm of the ocean. She, along with the other expedition members, turned back, heading towards their futures and destinies. Unfortunately, their journey home was not entirely smooth and easy. For several weeks, the health of Sacagawea's son significantly worsened, and he became so dangerously ill that all the expedition participants united to help the little boy recover and get better. Thanks to their efforts and care, he managed to defeat the illness and emerge from his critical condition. Apart from the illness of little Pompey, the return journey was relatively calm and free of major incidents, which was a blessing and relief for everyone. In the year 1806, more than a year after Sacagawea had joined the researchers, the long-awaited moment arrived, the time to return to their homeland in the Hadadza tribe. Of course, we cannot know exactly what feelings overwhelmed her at that moment, when this long and challenging journey came to an end. However, it is clear that saying goodbye to Lewis and Clark was a very touching and emotional event. Clark loved Sacagawea's son so much that he even considered adopting the boy to keep him in his family. For 3 years, Sacagawea and her husband lived among the Hadadza people, trying to adapt to their new life and circumstances. But deep down, both felt that their hearts were drawn to the wild nature and uncharted expanses. Soon, they began preparing to leave St. Louis. However, before that, fate prepared a tragic moment for them. Sacagawea made a very difficult decision. She realized that thanks to her wealth, social status, and the sincere love demonstrated by Lewis, Clark could provide her child with a much better life than what was possible in her own family. In 1809, Sacagawea and her husband decided to leave Pompeii and St. Louis, where Clark took the boy into his guardianship so he could attend school and eventually become an explorer like his mother. At that time, Sacagawea was already carrying her second child in her womb. Unfortunately, the pregnancy was very difficult. She suffered from severe ailments, was extremely weakened, and ill. However, despite all the hardships, in her characteristic manner, Sacagawea managed to give birth to a girl, whom they named Lizette. This happened in 1812. Unfortunately, she did not have the chance to truly get to know her little girl, as a tragedy soon followed. In December of 1812, Sayakaya fell seriously ill, and historians agree that the cause of this deadly ailment could have been a putrid fever or perhaps typhus. In any case, the illness proved to be fatal for her, despite the numerous trials and hardships she had endured earlier. This time, Sayakaya was unable to overcome the disease. She died on December 20th, 1812, at the age of just 24. However, some researchers believe that Sayakaya's story is not over at this point. There are grounds to think that her fate continues to remain a mystery, both for history and for those who remember her. In the early 20th century, one researcher claimed that Sacagawea lived until 1984 and died in Wyoming. Despite the popularity of this information in certain circles, over 100 years later and after thorough investigations, most historians regard it as unreliable. It is generally believed that this refers to another woman, now known as the Windy River Sacagawea, who bears the same name but is entirely unrelated to the original person. After losing her wife to illness and her son to a mysterious figure named William Clark, the widow decided to start a new life and create a new family. She gratefully accepted Clark's offer to officially adopt his other child, Lizetta, while herself returning to the familiar life of a hunter and fur trader. While Pompey, her son, grew up and inherited her invisible yet strong penchant for adventure. Characteristic of her, Lizetta's son, Clark's child, unfortunately, was not so fortunate. The only thing known about her today is the assumption that she most likely died in childhood or adolescence, as no other information about her fate exists. Meanwhile, a man named Tucson, known for his incline to wrongdoings, continued leading a decadent life and eventually married at least 5 times. His last wife was only 14 years old when they tied their fates together, while Tucson was already over 70. Even death could not permanently halt Sacagawea's destiny. After her death, she became a symbol not only for America, but also for the Shoshone people. In memory of her role in mapping the country, her face was depicted on American currency, and the river where she heroically saved important expedition documents was named the Sacagawea River. One of the most well-known aspects of her story is supposedly a romance with William Clark. It is clear that they got along well. Clark affectionately called her Jenny. She saved him from a brutal husband, and she loved her little son very much. Despite frequent portrayals of their shared love in books and movies, most historians tend to believe that they had no secret romantic relationship. They sincerely valued and cared for each other, but their relationship lacked passionate confessions, moonlit walks, or romantic glances that would indicate deep love. Sacagawea's story is complex and difficult to fully understand, since all that is known about her are entries in other people's diaries, as she left no documentary evidence herself. There are no letters or notes written by her. As a result, it is extremely challenging to penetrate her inner world and understand who she was or what she truly thought. However, one thing is certain. She was born for adventure, and her fate was predetermined by a desire for new discoveries. Depending on the interpretation of her name, it can mean either boat launcher or bird woman. In either case, it can be said that for Sacagawea, observing the surrounding world became an inseparable part of her destiny and life journey. Every step she took, every movement, was infused with a thirst for knowledge and curiosity about the world around her. Thank you for listening to the story from the Historical Tale section. It helps to better understand the past and its undisclosed secrets. If you enjoy uncovering the most interesting and astonishing facts about history and human destinies, continue exploring our materials. They allow a deeper immersion into the unforgettable world of the past. And don't forget that you can always visit our main page, the Factinate website, where even more impressive and astonishing information about everything in the world is collected.